Celeste Wren, Elias Wren, and Seraphine Vale, three names forever entangled in a web of betrayal, power, and revenge. What began as a love story between a billionaire and his devoted wife unraveled into a scandal so dark it ended in death, destruction, and a fugitive on the run. The affair was only the beginning. What followed was a carefully orchestrated downfall, a poisoned glass of whiskey, and a shocking twist that left one woman in tears, one man in the morgue, and another fleeing for her life. Elias Wren was the kind of man who commanded attention the moment he entered a room. He was a billionaire with a reputation for calculated precision, a man whose instincts in business had built an empire that spanned multiple industries: real estate, tech, luxury goods. Everything he touched turned to gold. His name was synonymous with power, wealth, and influence. But beyond his financial success, he was also a man who seemed to have achieved personal perfection. He had married Celeste Moreau, a woman admired for her grace and beauty, and together they were the picture of a flawless union. Celeste had grown up in a world of privilege, but unlike the cutthroat socialites who thrived in high society, she was soft-spoken and kind. She had met Elias at a charity gala years before, and despite his reputation as a ruthless businessman, she had been captivated by the man underneath, the one who could make a room fall silent with a single look, the one who rarely let people in but had chosen her. Their love story, at least to the outside world, had been nothing short of a fairy tale. From the moment they were married, their life had been painted in perfection. Lavish vacations to secluded islands, appearances at elite events where they were photographed in designer attire, whispers of admiration wherever they went. It seemed as if nothing could tarnish what they had. When Celeste became pregnant, it only solidified the idea that they were untouchable. She envisioned a future where their child would grow up surrounded by love, stability, and the kind of privilege money could buy without the emptiness that often came with it. What Celeste didn't know, what she never would have imagined, was that behind the perfect image, her husband was hiding something that would shatter her world. Elias had always been a man of control, someone who planned every step of his life meticulously. But there was one thing he hadn't accounted for: Seraphine Vale. Seraphine was unlike the women in Elias's world. She was not from old money, nor did she pretend to be anything other than what she was, a woman who knew exactly how to manipulate her way to the top. Born into a life of mediocrity, she had clawed her way into elite circles through sheer determination and an acute understanding of human weakness. She had met Elias at an exclusive business event, and while he had initially dismissed her as just another ambitious woman eager to attach herself to power, Seraphine had been different. She was sharp, intoxicatingly confident, and most importantly, unpredictable. Their affair had begun impulsively, a distraction Elias had convinced himself was harmless. But Seraphine was not the kind of woman content with being hidden in the shadows. She was possessive, demanding, and unwilling to remain a secret indefinitely. What had started as stolen moments in luxury hotels soon became something more dangerous. When Elias tried to pull away, she reminded him of what they had shared, of how he had let his guard down, how she knew things about him that no one else did. As Celeste busied herself with preparations for the baby, blissfully unaware of the deception unfolding behind her back, Seraphine was growing restless. She had been patient long enough. She had imagined a life where Elias would leave his wife, a world where she could take Celeste's place, where she wouldn't have to be hidden away like an inconvenient secret. But as the weeks passed, and Elias continued to treat her as nothing, more than an indulgence, Seraphine's patience turned into resentment. And then, one night, she made a decision. If Elias would not give her the position she believed she deserved, she would take matters into her own hands. If Celeste thought her marriage was built on love and devotion, Seraphine would make sure she saw the truth. She would destroy the illusion with undeniable proof, Photographs, letters, evidence that Elias had never truly belonged to her. With a chilling sense of determination, Seraphine gathered everything she needed. A collection of photographs taken in secret, a letter that would cut deeper than any wound. The life Celeste had believed in was about to be torn apart. And the worst part? She never even saw it coming. The package arrived on a quiet afternoon, just as Celeste Wren was settling into the nursery, carefully arranging tiny clothes into drawers. The past few months had been filled with anticipation, a soft, glowing happiness that wrapped around her like a warm embrace. She was only weeks away from meeting her child, and despite the exhaustion of pregnancy, she felt at peace. Life, as far as she knew, was perfect. The knock on the door was unexpected, but not unusual. She assumed it was another gift from a well-wisher. Perhaps another expensive set of baby clothes or a handwritten note from a friend. The box was small, wrapped neatly in brown paper with no return address. It felt light in her hands. With a slight smile, she carried it into the living room, lowering herself carefully onto the couch before peeling away the paper. Inside, a stack of glossy photographs greeted her. At first, they meant nothing, just images of a luxury hotel room, the kind Elias often stayed in during business trips. But as she flipped through them, the pieces began to form a picture she couldn't comprehend. The bed, the mirror reflecting tangled sheets, the unmistakable curve of Elias's back, his face turned away but his identity undeniable. Then, Seraphine Vale, her lips against his neck, her arms around his shoulders, her body pressed into him in ways that needed no explanation. Celeste's breath caught in her throat. The images blurred as her eyes filled with tears, but she forced herself to keep looking, each picture more damning than the last. Some were close-up shots, Seraphine's, smirk directed at the camera as if she had known exactly what she was doing. Others were taken from a distance, as if someone had followed them, documenting every moment of their betrayal. At the bottom of the stack lay a single envelope, its contents even crueler than the photos. "He belongs to me now. You should leave, while you still have your dignity." The words were simple, but their impact was catastrophic. The room around her swayed, and for a moment, Celeste thought she might faint. Her hand instinctively went to her stomach, the life growing inside her, the child she had believed was being welcomed into a home filled with love. But now, everything felt like a carefully crafted lie. Her mind raced through the past few months, searching for signs, for clues she had missed. Elias had always been busy, constantly traveling, but she had never doubted his love. Had she been foolish? Had she been blind? The humiliation hit her like a tidal wave, drowning her in shame. The entire time she had been planning for their future, he had been betraying her, indulging in another woman while she carried his child. She wanted to scream, to throw the photos into the fire and pretend none of it was real. But no amount of denial could erase what she had seen. The evidence was undeniable. There was no room for explanation, no misunderstanding that could soften the truth. Rage began to bubble beneath the surface, but it was overshadowed by a deep, overwhelming sorrow. This was supposed to be the happiest time of her life. Yet here she was, holding proof that her marriage had already crumbled. There was no coming back from this. No apology, no excuse would ever be enough. The decision came, faster than she expected. Celeste had always been known for her composure, her ability to handle even the harshest situations with grace. But this wasn't just about her anymore. She had a child to think about, a child who deserved more than to be born into a broken home filled with secrets and lies. With hands shaking, she reached for her phone and dialed her lawyer. The words felt foreign, surreal, as she spoke them aloud. "I want a divorce." By the time Elias returned home that evening, the house was eerily silent. The nursery door was ajar, the drawers half emptied. In their bedroom, Celeste's closet, had been stripped bare, her presence erased as if she had never been there at all. On the bed, the photographs lay spread out in plain view, waiting for him like a ghost of his mistakes. The world would soon know. The media would feast on the scandal, turning their marriage into a public spectacle. Elias might have been a man of power, but even he couldn't escape the storm that was coming. Celeste had left, but the destruction had only just begun. Seraphine Vale had expected triumph to feel sweeter. She had envisioned a moment of satisfaction, the thrill of watching Celeste Wren unravel under the weight of her betrayal. But as the scandal unfolded and Celeste disappeared from the public, something unsettling settled in Seraphine's chest. Victory had come too easily. Elias was hers, yet he was not behaving as she had imagined. In the beginning, he had been furious. She had anticipated that reaction. He was a man who despised, losing control. When he realized what she had done, how she had destroyed his marriage with a single calculated move, he had refused to speak to her for days. But anger always faded, and Seraphine knew how to make him forget his fury. She had taken great pleasure in reminding him why he had come to her in the first place. And yet something was wrong. Elias had changed. He went through the motions, taking her to expensive restaurants, appearing at events with her on his arm, but the fire was gone. He was distant in a way that unsettled her, calculating in a way that made her uneasy. He had always been cold, even ruthless in business, but with Celeste gone, there should have been no reason for him to keep that distance from her. Seraphine was not a woman who accepted uncertainty. She had not clawed her way to the top to be ignored, nor had she sacrificed everything for a man who would not appreciate it. She had won. Celeste was out of the picture. The world saw her as the new woman in Elias's life, but something told. She was still playing a game, and she didn't yet know all the rules. The first sign of trouble came subtly. Elias's business dealings became more secretive. He left town more frequently, often without explanation. Seraphine prided herself on being able to read people, and she could see the shift in his behavior. He was watching her closely, and it unsettled her. Then there were the whispers. People around her had begun to act differently. The staff at Elias's estate, once cordial, now avoided her gaze. Business associates who had once welcomed her presence seemed hesitant. Even the media, which had once devoured every detail of the affair, had started to grow cautious in their coverage. Something was happening behind the scenes, and Seraphine had no idea what it was. She began to dig. Elias had always been careful with his secrets, but Seraphine had spent years perfecting the art of uncovering them. She knew how to eavesdrop on conversations that weren't meant for her. She knew how to slip into his office when he wasn't home. And eventually, she found what she had been looking for. Elias had been investigating her. Files sat neatly arranged in his desk drawer, containing details about her past, things no one was supposed to know. There were records of former lovers, men who had mysteriously disappeared or suffered financial ruin after becoming involved with her. Old news clippings about suspicious deaths, bank statements from hidden accounts she had thought were untraceable. She had underestimated him. Elias was not a man who forgave betrayal. She had believed she was playing a game of power, but she had failed to see that he was playing one too. And now, he had everything he needed to get rid of her. Panic crept in, but Seraphine refused to let it consume her. If Elias thought he could simply discard her, he was wrong. She had destroyed his marriage. If necessary, she would destroy his life too. Elias had made a mistake. He had let her get close enough to know his own secrets. And if he was planning to turn against her, she would make sure she struck first. Elias Wren had always prided himself on being untouchable. He built his empire with ruthless precision, eliminating threats before they could rise against him. But this time, he had underestimated the woman he had let into his life. Seraphine Vale was not just a mistress scorned. She was a predator, and now she knew he was hunting her. For weeks, Elias played his part carefully. He still took Seraphine to high-profile events, still kept up appearances. But beneath the polished exterior, he was setting a trap. His private investigators had uncovered more than enough to bury her. He had proof of bank fraud, connections to missing men who had once been wealthy benefactors, and whispers of a darker pattern, a trail of destruction that followed Seraphine wherever she went. The plan was simple. He would expose her, cut her off, and ensure she never had the power to retaliate. He was prepared for a fight. What he wasn't prepared for was just how far Seraphine would go to win. On the night it all fell apart, Elias was alone in his penthouse, sipping his usual whiskey as he went over the final steps of his plan. He had scheduled a private meeting with law enforcement. By morning, Seraphine would be facing serious criminal charges, and he would be rid of her for good. He allowed himself a rare moment of satisfaction. She had made a fatal mistake. She had come for him without realizing he had been watching her from the start. But Elias had made a mistake too. The dizziness started slowly, creeping up on him like a shadow. At first, he thought it was exhaustion, the weight of the past few months catching up to him, but then his vision blurred. His limbs felt heavy. The glass slipped from his fingers, shattering against the marble floor. He staggered forward, reaching for support, but the room was spinning. Seraphine had always been careful, but this time, she had needed to act fast. The poison she had chosen wasn't meant to kill instantly. It was subtle, enough to disorient him, to make his eventual fall seem like an accident. By the time he reached the balcony, he was barely conscious. His world was tilting, and the last thing he saw before the darkness swallowed him was the city skyline stretching endlessly below. When authorities arrived the next morning, Elias Wren was dead. The official report was swift, an accidental fall from his penthouse balcony. The media painted the image of a powerful man who had lost control, a tragic end to a life of ambition and excess. But the investigation didn't end there. Detectives found inconsistencies. The shattered whiskey glass, the signs of struggle that didn't match a simple fall. The toxicology report revealed traces of an uncommon substance in his system, one known to cause dizziness and confusion. And then there was Seraphine. She played the role of the grieving lover well, her tears carefully timed, her statements to the press full of sorrow. But she had miscalculated. Elias had made powerful enemies over the years, but he had also made powerful allies, people who would not accept his death at face value. As investigators dug deeper, the pieces of the puzzle began to take shape. Bank records showing suspicious, withdrawals, hidden messages between Seraphine and a contact overseas, security footage of her entering Elias's penthouse the night he died. The woman who had believed herself untouchable was about to face the harshest reality of all. Elias Wren was gone, but Seraphine Vale's story was far from over. The news of Elias Wren's death spread like wildfire, shaking the world of the elite. The billionaire tycoon, once considered invincible, had met an untimely and mysterious end. Official reports cited a tragic accident, but whispers of foul play filled every corner of high society. The media dissected every detail, questioning whether the man who had built an empire truly fell or if he had been pushed. In the days following his death, Seraphine Vale reveled in her apparent victory. She had played the part of the devastated lover flawlessly. Cameras captured her in black, her face pale and drawn, eyes filled with grief. She gave carefully controlled statements speaking of how Elias had struggled with the pressures of his empire, how she had wished she could have saved him. To the world, she was the heartbroken woman left behind by a man who had succumbed to his own demons. But behind closed doors, she was already making moves. She had expected Elias's fortune to be hers. There had been no official marriage, but She had ingrained herself deep enough into his affairs to believe she would benefit. He had lavished her with gifts, funded her lifestyle, and she had made sure to keep a paper trail of his financial support. She expected the will to name her, at least in some capacity. Then came the first blow. Elias had been prepared. Days before his death, he had finalized changes to his will. Every single asset, every last cent, was transferred into an untouchable trust in his unborn child's name, overseen by Celeste Wren. Seraphine had nothing, not a house, not a car, not a single account in her name. Elias had anticipated her betrayal and had made sure that in the end she was left with nothing. Panic set in, but Seraphine was not the kind of woman who accepted defeat easily. She knew how to maneuver her way out of impossible situations. If she couldn't claim Elias's wealth through legal means, she would find another way. But before she could act, the second blow came, this time from law enforcement. The investigation into Elias's death had taken a turn. While the initial ruling pointed to an accident, forensic reports began telling a different story. Toxicology results revealed traces of a rare substance in his system, one designed to cause disorientation. The pattern of the broken glass, the unnatural angle of his fall, it all suggested something far more sinister. Then came the surveillance footage. The image wasn't perfectly clear, but it was enough. Seraphine Vale entering Elias's penthouse hours before his death. As detectives pieced together the evidence, an arrest warrant was issued. But Seraphine was already gone. She had anticipated trouble and had planned for an escape. Using forged documents, she fled the country before authorities could close in. For months, she remained a ghost, slipping between luxury hideaways, relying on offshore accounts she had managed to protect. But Elias's allies were relentless. He had been a man of immense power, and those who had benefited from his empire were not willing to let his death go unanswered. The world's most elite bounty hunters were soon enlisted to track her down. Seraphine, once the predator, had now become the prey. Then, in an unexpected twist, a leak surfaced, one that would change the course of the story forever. Someone within law enforcement, or perhaps an enemy she had made along the way, released details of her crimes to the press. The photos of her affair, the evidence of her manipulations, the accusations surrounding Elias's death, all of it was made public. Overnight, she became the most wanted woman in the world. Airports were alerted. Borders were secured, and financial institutions were instructed to freeze any accounts linked to her name. The glamorous socialite who had once walked red carpets was now a fugitive, hunted by those she had underestimated. In the end, Seraphine Vale disappeared without a trace. Some say she changed her identity, starting a new life in a distant country. Others believe she met a darker fate at the hands of those who sought vengeance for Elias's death. As for Celeste Wren, she remained untouched by the chaos that had consumed her husband's killer. She gave birth to Elias's child, inheriting his empire, ensuring that his legacy lived on. And so, the story came to an end. The billionaire was gone. The mistress had vanished. But the scandal, the betrayal, and the deadly consequences of a love affair built on deception, those would never be forgotten.